We're now ready to move on to our two final remove methods, the class-based method find one and remove, and the class-based method find by ID and remove. So both these are going to be somewhat similar in nature. They're both intended to find a very particular record and remove it. The big difference is that find by ID and remove works by looking up an ID of a record, whereas find one remove works by giving some criteria, and then the first record in a collection that matches that criteria will be removed. So this is where, again, things start to get a little bit repetitive in the Mongoose and Mongo world. Because if you think about it, we could really re-implement find by ID and remove by using find one and remove. We could just look for a record's particular ID and remove that one. So again, definitely some repetitive stuff, but getting a good handle on all the different options for modifying and removing records is definitely something to work towards. So let's add in a little bit of implementation for both of these. We're going to call the respective method to remove a record, and then we're going to have the identical follow-up where we're going to try to find the record that was just removed and then assert that it does not exist. So first we'll start by adding in the find one and remove. So this again is a class method, so we'll refer to the user model, then find one and remove. And then we need to pass in some very specific criteria for the name, or kind of something that represents a very particular user. So again, we'll look for a user with a name of Joe. Just to be clear about what I was saying just a moment ago about how we could re-implement the find by ID and remove, we could just as well do ID joe.id like so. And that would be completely identical or equivalent to find by ID and remove. But we want to make sure that we can just find a record by looking up their name. Okay, so now again, we can copy paste down all the same assertion logic. So I'm going to grab both the thens and the assertion inside. So I'll put that right in here. Do make sure that you don't have a semicolon after the find one and remove. That's an easy little typo to make. All right, let's save this and see how we're doing. So I'll save, and it looks like, okay, well, I keep making the same error. Did not reference the callback done inside of our new it block. So I'm gonna make sure that I have done inside of here, right after the it statement. And we can run again. And okay, definitely looking better. So 7 passing. I'm going to again just change out the assertion to make sure that this is a legitimate pass. This is always a really good test to do to make sure that you don't have some little typo that's erroneously causing some success. All right, and so it definitely fails, which means our spec is definitely passing. So we'll go back to asserting that user is null. In other words, the user is not found. Okay, so there's find one and remove. Absolutely fantastic whenever you want to find like a specific record by using some unique property. So in our case, we haven't really enforced any type of uniqueness around name. We haven't really put anything where we said, yeah, there can only be one person named Joe. But if we had, say, a good example would be like email. If we had very specific email addresses or very unique email addresses, and we wanted to find a user with a very particular email address and remove them, that would be a great use case for find one and remove. All right, so I think we're on a little bit of a roll, so we might as well just go ahead and finish up with find by ID and remove. I think you've probably got a pretty good idea of how this one's going to work. It is, again, a class-based method. So we'll reference user and then call find by ID and remove. And then rather than passing in an object here, we can just pass in the ID of the record that we want to get rid of. Now again, that same question as before with that whole object ID business comes into play. We don't have to worry about object IDs with find by ID and remove. Like Mongoose will take care of all that stuff for us. So all we have to do is pass in Joe ID, like so. Notice that we don't have to provide an object here of like a key of ID and a value of ID. It is just the raw ID by itself. And then after this, we'll put in the exact same follow-up logic again, like so. We'll save. And let's make sure, oh, okay, I just keep on making the same error. I forgot to add in the reference to done. So there's my done. Okay, much better. And again, I'm going to make my spec fail just to make sure that everything is working as I would expect. Yep, looks like the spec fails when I replace what we are asserting with a falsy statement. And so I'll flip it back to null and just finally confirm, yep, everything's passing. All right, so there we go. These are our 4 different methods of removing a user. Again, this is really opening the door to something that we're going to find a lot of inside of Mongo and Mongoose. There are just more than one way to accomplish a given operation. So we're going to find a lot of the same operations or the same kind of methodologies for removing records or removing a single record, removing a bunch of records, all that kind of good stuff is going to apply to updating records as well. So let's continue in the next section and take a look at all the different ways we have available to us to update records inside of a collection.